called being in charge, Marie.
Yeah, right.
Directing.
Yeah, right. Let me get my baton.
All right. Okay, I think everybody has been admitted. Good evening, everyone. This is the public hearing for the expansion CON for Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps. This is being held by the Regional EMS Council of New York City. Our hearing officer this evening is Mr. Tim Hannigan. He will be running the meeting tonight. We have Clarissa, our stenographer. If you are called to speak, please make sure you identify your name and what organization you're with clearly, so Clarissa can properly record it in the stenographic record. With that, I will hand this over to our hearing officer.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, everyone. The time is now 6:04 p.m. This is a proceeding which is a public hearing in the matter of the application of Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps submitted an application for an expansion of their operating authority and an amendment of its certificate to include the community of Bayside, which is bounded, as stated in its narrative, by the Long Island Expressway to the south, 23rd Avenue, 24th Avenue, and 26th Avenue to the north, the Cross Island Parkway to the east, and Francis Lewis Boulevard to the west. The applicant identified generally this geographical area as the entirety of the area formerly served by the Bayside Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps. My name is Tim Hannigan. I'm an attorney from Del Mar, New York. And as Scott indicated, I'm serving as the hearing officer for this hearing in accordance with Department of Health Policy Statement 0606. As hearing officer, my job is to moderate this proceeding and ensure that we follow generally accepted hearing procedures. Following the conclusion of this hearing, I will prepare a report that sets forth findings for the Regional Emergency Medical Services Council of New York City and its ambulance committee. This hearing is being held pursuant to Public Health Law Article 30 and is being conducted in accordance with the procedures set forth in Policy Statement 0606. The purpose of this hearing is to provide a technical review and an objective evaluation of the applicant's statement of need, as well as any other testimony presented by witnesses this evening. It is the intent of the hearing process to obtain input from the general public and from everyone who uses, provides, pays for, or participates in the EMS system in the region. A stenographic record and a video record of this proceeding is being made. The testimony taken and all exhibits received will constitute the record in this matter. In virtual attendance at this hearing are multiple members of the ambulance committee appointed by the REMSCO, as well as several council members. Because we're all playing Hollywood squares here, they can kindly wave to everybody, identify themselves. There are multiple present. All testimony and presentations will be directed to the council and its ambulance committee. Any questions that the applicant has or that the speaker has for the committee can be addressed to me. And only committee members or council members can ask questions individually and direct them to either a witness that speaks or to the applicant. To support the pending application, the applicant bears the burden of proof for the demonstration of public need. Public need is defined in Policy Statement 0606 as the demonstrated absence, reduced availability, or an inadequate level of care in ambulance or emergency medical service available to a geographical area which is not readily correctable through the reallocation or improvement of existing resources. In this case, the application was deemed complete on April 23rd, 2021. As a matter of housekeeping, I've identified several exhibits pre-hearing, and I will identify those now. The redacted application has been marked and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 1. A copy of the legal notice of public hearing, which was published in advance of the hearing date, together with a supporting affidavit and notice of the application made by registered or certified mail by the REMSCO to the chief executive officers of all general hospitals, ambulance services, and municipalities operating within the same county where the applicant seeks to operate, has been marked as Exhibit 2. The letter of fitness and competency from the Department of Health attesting to the applicant's fitness and competency to operate the proposed service has been received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 3. The timeline entitled Account of Events, which is prepared by Council Executive Director Marie Diglio, is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 4. The PowerPoint presentation transmitted by the applicant to the council in advance of the public hearing, which will be displayed for all present this evening, has been received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 5. An email transmitted by the applicant containing approximately 55 letters in support from residents of the affected area is received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 6. An email to the council from Charles J. Silverstein, President, Whitestone Community Ambulance Service, is received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 7. A letter from Dr. Louis Rotkowitz to the applicant identifying himself as the applicant's medical director as of May 4th, 2021, and expressing support for the present application is received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 8. And finally, a written submission with supporting documentation from Glen Oaks, a volunteer ambulance corps, made in opposition to the pending application is received and is incorporated into this proceeding as Exhibit 9. I note with respect to Exhibit 9 that those materials were received, say, within an hour, hour and a half or so of this hearing. They have been communicated to the applicant in advance of the hearing. All exhibits were received in advance of this evening's hearing. We will commence by a presentation by the applicant. Mr. Lyons, is it your intention to be the sole presenter on behalf of the applicant, or will Mr. Scheinbergs and Hoffman be assisting you? There you go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, sir. Thank you.
Yes, they need to be co-hosts.
Okay. Are there any other persons that will be presenting in your application, your initial presentation?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so Charlie, make Mike co-host, please.
All done.
All
Good
right.
to go.
And Brian Scheinberg?
What was the name again?
Brian Scheinberg.
Okay, all set.
All right, so after the, in a few moments, we'll begin with the applicant's presentation. Once the applicant's presentation concludes, the council members and the committee members can ask any questions of the applicant if they wish. Thereafter, we will open the floor to those individuals who requested to speak. Each person requesting to be heard in the public forum will be allotted approximately 3 to 5 minutes to offer comments, testimony, or make their presentation. I may extend this time period if circumstances warrant or for good cause shown. At the conclusion of the public forum, the applicant will be afforded the opportunity, if they so desire, for additional time for the limited purpose of rebuttal. Rebuttal time is for the limited purpose of confronting or responding to any opposition made during the course of the hearing. I will now call the names of the individuals who are registered to speak in the public comment portion. At the time I call a public speaker, I'll also identify the person who is next up. I ask that the person who's on deck, so to speak, be prepared to offer any remarks when called upon so that we can assure some efficient procedure and flow of this hearing. I will now recite the names of speakers in the order in which they are to proceed. First, we'll hear from the applicant and the applicant's presentation by Michael Lyons, Brian Scheinberg, and Jordan Hoffman. Then we will open the public forum and go to Jenna Lanzetta, Chris Capo, Ashley Kim, Ed Gorman, Dr. Louis Rotkowitz, Dr. Christopher Calandrella, and Reverend Monsignor Thomas Michalski. Thereafter, we will continue our public session with Gerald Gelbard, Dave Mekatansky, Louis Greco, and Michael Berlin, Esquire. Is there anyone present for this hearing that has not previously registered to speak, whose name I did not read, that would like to speak during the public comment session? If so, please indicate in the chat, and we'll set you up with Scott and Charlie. All right, seeing none, Charlie and Scott, you can let me know if someone signs up, and we'll accord them some time. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and spell your name for our stenographer, and your address. And if you are speaking on behalf of a particular entity, either in support or in opposition to the application, please identify that as well as the name of the entity for which you are speaking. And if there are any questions during this proceeding, please place them in the chat, and Charlie or Scott and I will identify those and answer any questions that members of the public or the committee or the applicant have. All right, There being no further comments in the chat relative to speakers, I welcome Mr. Lyons on behalf of the applicant to offer the applicant's presentation.
Okay, good evening, and thank you to Mr. Hannigan, Mrs. Diglio, the ambulance committee, REMSCO, for putting this all together. It's a tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank everyone for spending the time in doing this so we can have our public hearing. My name is Mike Lyons, and I'm the president of the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps. With me is Brian Scheinberg, the vice president. We also have here from our board, Terry Will, our secretary, Vincent Chu, a director, and Jeff Liu, a director as well. I'm going to go and give a short presentation. It'll cover our operating area expansion, the issue, and our plan. We'll share a little bit about Bay Community, who we are, what we cover, and what we do. Next slide, please. We're here today to demonstrate the public need for additional ambulance service in Bayside and restore ambulance service in Bayside back to the level it was in 2018. On the left is a high-level map to give you an idea of the area we're talking about. The yellow shaded polygon illustrates the general area formerly covered by Bayside. The exact proposed area of expansion and associated detail and street map are located on page 5 and page 27 and 28 of our application. You can see that there are 2 volunteer agency headquarters. To the north, on Fort Totten, the yellow pin is Bay Communities. To the east, the yellow pin is Little Neck Douglaston. A little background. Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps held the con for Bayside for over 60 years. They had 2 ambulances serving the community located in the heart of Bayside. You can see in that blue star, centrally located in the yellow shaded polygon, is the Bayside headquarters building. In the second half of 2018, they lost their Department of Health operating certificate, leaving a void in Bayside. Towards the end of 2019, a new board at Bayside Ambulance set out to restart the Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Even though Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps lost their operating certificate, they still own the building on 42nd Avenue. They still own ambulances, and they are still trying to serve the community in any way they can. During the summer of last year, the surrounding agencies, Belrose, Little Neck Douglaston, Bay Community, got together with Bayside to see how we can support this revitalization project. We're here with this application as a result of that work. Late in 2020, as a result of the Glen Oaks expansion con application to add 1 more ambulance to the area, the New York City REMSCO determined that there is a public need in Bayside. There is a public need to bring it back to 2018 levels when there were 2 ambulances, in Bayside. As I mentioned, this area was served by 2 ambulances, not 1. We, Bay Community, Little Neck Douglaston, and Bayside are looking to help provide an additional ambulance to the community. We have an agreement to use a Bayside ambulance and to dispatch from the Bayside headquarters building at 42nd Avenue in the fall after the building construction is finished. Our application for expansion is to cover the same area that Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps previously covered. Next slide, please. We want to share a bit about ourselves and our agency. Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps started back in 1968, more than 50 years ago, serving North Bayside, East Clearview, and Fort Totten. We served Fort Totten when it was an active military base, serving the residential community living on the base. In 1996, the military housing closed on Fort Totten, and since then, Fort Totten has become mostly parkland. There are no longer any residents on Fort Totten. Bay Community has maintained the same operational capacity while serving a decreased population. We have 2 ambulances to support the community. In our history, we've done everything from single patient emergencies to plane crashes at LaGuardia to 9/11, now to the pandemic. We have state certified EMTs. Our ambulance corps is set up on a community-based firehouse model. In New York City, the first responders with the best response time are coming from community-based firehouses. Essentially headquartered on Fort Totten in a multi-building, multi-acre complex. Our facilities include an ambulance garage, crew quarters, kitchen, bunk room. We can also respond from our homes to the building or directly to an emergency. We're 100% volunteer with members that are from the community. A couple of examples are myself. I grew up here in Bayside. I've been involved in Bay community since 1992 and have had a leadership role in administration since 9/11. My parents also live here in Bayside. As a teenager, I took a CPR class at the Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps. And I'm looking for that to continue for others in Bayside, that there's something local that a kid can walk to, ride his bike, and learn and enter the field of emergency service. Next, we have Brian here, the Vice President. He's a lifelong Bayside-er. He's a graduate of Bayside High School. You have another director here, Vincent Chu. He's also a Cardozo grad, right? From the area here, right in Bayside. You know, we have a lot of ties to Bayside. And, you know, we're a local Bayside organization. Next slide, please. Our presence is strong in the Bayside area. It's not only emergency medical, we also do community outreach. We're doing everything we can to provide service to the Bayside community without an official operating area certificate, which, as you know, limits us from putting an ambulance on the street, which is the gap we're trying to fill. Since 2018, we, Bay Community, and Little Neck Douglaston extended all of the service that we were allowed to the Bayside community. Educational outreach, for example, you see here the Girl Scouts at Our Lady of Blessed Sacrament. And we also have an example of the Back to School Carnival here in Bayside as well. Standbys at major events. We've worked with Glen Oaks and Little Neck Douglaston on emergency standby services, such as marathons that actually go through multiple volunteer ambulance corps operating area, as well as bike races that do the same. We also do CPR and first aid training. Now, another thing we do is a booming business with the aging community in this area, in our expanded area, if granted. We do mobility assistance equipment. So we have plenty of elderly in the area that will call up and ask, hey, can I borrow a wheelchair, a walker, a cane? I have an elderly family member coming to visit for 2 weeks. I need, you know, medical equipment just for their stay here. You know, when they fly back, then you'll go ahead and we'll return the equipment to you. So these same folks that, you know, borrow all that stuff locally from us here on Fort Totten ask us, can you take us to the hospital? And when they're in the Bayside area, the answer is no. So, you know, we're looking to make sure that we can provide everything and include additional choice in a service provider to take them to the hospital. Next slide, please. Public need exists now more than ever. We were doing mutual aid with Bayside before they lost their operating certificate. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit and FDNY activated citywide mutual aid, we provided ambulance service for 10 straight weeks to Bayside. Just recently, in the first quarter of 2021, REMSCO issued an advisory activating all city volunteer ambulance agencies, regardless of operating territory, to support the city's vaccination programs. This allowed the surrounding agencies like Little Neck Douglaston, Belrose, Glen Oaks, and ourselves to send an ambulance to the 2 vaccination sites here in Bayside. Without these directives, no volunteer agency held an operating certificate to send an ambulance into Bayside, a community that lost their service coverage through no fault of their own. Our application for expansion is looking to remedy that. Next slide, please. We want to thank everyone that has supported our application of expansion. We are overwhelmed by the showing of support of public need. We received endorsements from federal, state, and city elected officials, 2 community boards, Community Board 7 and Community Board 11, support from other area volunteer ambulance corps, support from the fire department, multiple area hospitals, churches, local civic associations, and numerous individual Bayside resident statements that indicate there's a public need in Bayside. Here is a big stack of them. It is more than 55. I think you don't have all the attachments that were sent to you, Mr. Hannigan, but the number is higher than that. The other thing is, we were a smaller agency, and we were able to get a tremendous amount of support because there's a tremendous amount of need. And, one extra ambulance out there in a time of need is definitely needed. Next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Hannigan. This concludes my presentation. I'll pass it back over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Real briefly, with respect to the exhibits, the 55 letters that I noted as the separate exhibit are in addition to those appended to the application. So the application and all the initial letters you submitted are exhibit 1, and then the 55 more are the later exhibit that I referred to. So we do have all. Do any members of the ambulance committee or the council have any questions for the applicant? Charlie, do you see any on your side?
No questions here.
No? Okay.
Oh, although there is a hand raised.
Okay. You can unmute that person.
Hi there, how are you? This is Travis Kessel, District 4.
Hi, Travis. Sure, go ahead.
All right, just a question on some of the testimony. During the 10-week deployment, exactly how many calls were done by the agency? And during the mutual aid activation for vaccine sites, how many sites and how many times have they covered individual sites?
Thank you. Mr. Lyons, did you hear that question?
Yes. As far as the COVID activation, I don't have that detail available, and it's not something that's in the application. So I'd have to look into that. As far as the vaccination sites were only recently opened up to us in the last week or two, and we've only been participating in one so far. Previously, the vaccination sites were in Southern Queens.
As a follow-up to that question, do you have your call total volume for 2020, which would include that 10-week period?
I believe we do have it in the application. I think we have an average in here. I don't know if we have it broken out by year. And I think we had 100 to 150 calls is what was mentioned in the application.
So would that be representative of the call volume for 2020, 100 to 150, somewhere in that range?
100 to 150, is that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the council? All right, seeing none, Mr. Lyons, in your introductory statement, you indicated that this council has previously and recently found public need in this area through the application by Glen Oaks. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. It's my understanding that your organization has appealed that finding. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. What is your organization contending that public need exists, but there was some other issue as to the appeal, or is it that public need does not exist?
No, we've always said public need exists, and it's the way the application was written and the boundaries were done. That is our, major appeal reason. The boundaries overlap with us and our area that we serve.
Okay.
And, really the application is put to cover the area that Bayside, previously covered, and they went outside of that and overstepped on us. And in the process, when we got a solicitation letter. It did not even include a northern boundary. So when we were notified and had a chance to respond, that was completely lacking from the solicitation. So at that point, literally that means, to the water, to completely overlap our whole entire area. And, we did try to, we sent them a letter, said they're opposed exactly to the way they had written the solicitation letter with missing boundaries, no map provided. So there was no, so we have to, obviously oppose that. We met with them, we gave them a whole big discussion over geopolitical boundaries and how to, submit it where there wouldn't be any conflict. And then when the application came out, that really, it conflicted. So that occurred. Then they tried to make changes during the hearing of what the boundaries were. And then further on, it got, with the boundaries changed again, and, leaving different community boards and completely going out of what was in their application. So really at this point, there's really no way to really say what the boundaries truly were and should be from the northern boundary of that application process. And, there's only a limited 30-day window that you can do something in regards to this process. So, after much discussion, we went ahead and filed the appeal. We, of course, we tried to encourage Glen Oaks to speak to the state about what geopolitical boundaries are, how, the REMSCO procedure is one thing, but when you actually look at the state, it's the state law is what you're doing, not, going by just a policy procedure that it may be not accurate. So we tried as much as we could. We asked them to, speak to a lawyer, try to, do that. And really, if the application had been written, it didn't overlap us at all, we would have had nothing to appeal. And, we would have just gone forward with our expansion as well. And, we've always been working with the Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps, right? And the best thing that, we had always thought is, if they were going to restart, we, who've bordered them for all these years should help them out with that and go forward with that. And when it came close that, Bayside, looked like they were, got a new board, they started going ahead and getting their house in order, getting, the nonprofit, everything back to the way it should properly be run, then you see Glen Oaks rushing in an application out for the area. So, then we, working with the other ambulance corps, doing a lot of analysis, then this is the, what we moved forward with to help them out. And really, the thing is about getting what Bayside people donated to Bayside, those assets, back to serving Bayside. That building that people made donations for, those ambulances that they have, and getting them turned back out to the Bayside community and serving the area.
Okay. With respect to Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps, you indicated that it's your intention, if this application is granted and you obtain operating authority, to use their facility and at least one of their ambulance resources. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have an agreement essentially in place for that to occur should you obtain operating authority for that area?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Independent of those two resources, that being the facility and the one ambulance, does your agency have sufficient resources to respond to the call volume that you anticipate you would receive in the affected area?
Yes, we have 2 ambulances of our own headquartered on Fort Totten, and we're a smaller agency. We've lost a residential population with the closing of the military housing on Fort Totten, and we can pick up extra calls. The fact that is on a day where we might not do a call, we would then be able to do a call in Bayside. That's basically, how we see that we'll be able to do that.
Okay. And sir, is your agency fully volunteer, or do you have a hybrid paid day crew, or how does your agency work as far as responding to calls?
It's 100% volunteer.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have for you, sir. Does any member of the council have any questions for Mr. Lyons before we proceed to the public comment portion of the meeting? Seeing none. Mr. Lyons, was Mr. Scheinberg going to make a presentation at this point as well on behalf of the applicant, or is he waiving his opportunity to speak?
He's waiving his opportunity to speak.
Okay. Is Mr. Hoffman, he's listed as your counsel, is he here to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we go to Mr. Hoffman now? He's listed next in the order, and then we'll open it up to the members of the public. Is Attorney Hoffman on? Yep, I see him there. He's muted. Charlie, can we unmute Mr. Hoffman?
Excuse me, Travis Kessel, District 4. Sorry, I was messaging Charlie for permission to speak, had my hand raised.
Okay, sure. Well, go ahead, Mr. Kessel.
I just wanted to follow up on a point brought up in your question. The overlap in the appeal, I know that he's stated that the half block overlap was what his issue is with the northern boundary, and it's a regionally approved application. So with a regionally approved application to service this area, and this application being put in for the same exact area, is Mike okay with overlapping agencies because it's his application, or where does that contradiction come into play?
Okay, so as far as the overlap on our existing area, that's our area of concern. The area that we filed for includes the area of Bayside that was covered and resided in Community Board 7, as well as in Community Board 11. So we wouldn't completely overlap Glen Oaks, but in a new area where no one's established and there's no active volunteer, overlap is totally fine. And especially in today's day and age of the way services are provided, it's in the Amazon era or the Uber era. It's all about having choice and as much providers as you can. Original operating areas were done in the 50s and 60s. That's not the way a new area would work today. So overlapping in an area that doesn't have a volunteer ambulance corps, there's no issue with that on our side.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that a regionally approved agency for that area, that's okay to be overlap, but a half block overlap into your agency is not okay.
Yeah, any overlap of our existing area that was not Bayside is not okay. So, and all the, it's the state that really decides, and issues an operating certificate. So it's up to the state. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that where things are okay.
Charlie, can you unmute Brian Scheinberg now?
Marie, we lost the hearing officer.
Okay, let me figure out what happened to the hearing officer. Sorry. Oh my goodness.
I'm sure he just had a connection issue. He'll probably rejoin in one moment.
All right, everybody take a 30-second break. Let's see where he is. Okay, I'm going to try and reach him. Give me a minute.
Marie, you want to give Tim a call,
giving him a
make sure he's
call.
jumping back on?
Yeah, I'm giving him a call. Just give me a second. I gotta find all his information. Goodness. He's all the way up in Albany. God knows what's going on. Okay, let's see. Let's find his information.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. 518-542-2015.
Yeah, everybody else is still in. Tim is reconnecting. Give him a few minutes. Yeah, for some reason, Tim got booted off and he is reconnecting right now. So just give him a minute. Did we lose anybody else or was it just Tim? Looks like it was just him.
I think it was just him. Looks like it was a connection issue.
Yeah, he doesn't know why it happened, but he's logging off and logging back on. We just started a storm out here where I am. I wonder if that has anything to do with Tim being kicked off.
Marie, you want to give me send me Tim's number? I'll give him a call, see if I can give him some tech support.
Okay. Okay, I just emailed and texted you, Joe. Sorry, everyone.
Got it.
All right, Marie, can you hear me now?
Ah, he's back. Yay.
All right. Sorry, apparently the Firehouse is out in our area here. There's a truck out front. I just asked the guy and he said we're ground plugged. So I'm on my phone.
You're muted.
There we
Yeah.
go. I believe where we left off, Mr. Kessler just asked a question of Mr. Lyons, and Mr. Lyons had finished responding to it. Were there any further questions or questions that follow up by council members to Mr. Lyons regarding his opening presentation?
I believe Mr. Scheinberg was going to speak.
Oh,
Mr. Hoffman.
Mr. Hoffman. Yeah, Mr. Hoffman's next up on behalf of the applicant.
Sorry.
If there are no further questions from Mr. Lyons, we will proceed with Attorney Hoffman on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Hoffman, go right ahead.
He's still muted.
Charlie, can you unmute Mr. Hoffman, please?
You will need to unmute himself.
Got it. Got it. It just popped up. All right. Now you can hear me?
Yes, I hear
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. All right. I'd like to join Mr. Lyons in thanking Mr. Hannigan and Ms. Diglio and members of the ambulance committee and the council for organizing this and being here today to determine if public need exists in Bayside for more ambulance service and better choices. A little about myself. I'm an attorney practicing in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. I grew up in Bayside. My family and friends still live in Bayside, and I'm extremely familiar and close with the community. I'm also an EMT and a second generation member of Bay Community. My parents actually met at Bay Community while they were both EMTs. Bay Community has served the community for over 50 years. They've done mutual aid with Bayside. I've done myself probably 50, 60 mutual aid calls just in Bayside. And I see Mr. Hannigan just left again. So do you want me to pause or what do you want me to do?
Just hold off one moment. This is
He's
Joseph.
still
Just-
here.
All right, because it just popped up and said that he left, but
Just hold off one moment, Jordan. I believe he was exiting on his
He's here.
phone and rejoining on his computer.
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
here. I see him.
okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, he's still here. He's just muted.
All right. Bay Community has staffed multiple ambulances during the COVID crisis, and they did so for 10 straight weeks and fulfilled need in Bayside and Bay Terrace and their current operating area. They've done mutual aid for all the surrounding ambulance corps for years, and a public need absolutely exists, and we look forward to the council approving the application for public need.
Thank you. Do any members of the council have any questions for Attorney Hoffman? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to a presentation by Jenna Lanzetta, President, Northwest Bayside Civic Association.
Hearing Officer Hannigan, can
Yes, sir.
I ask that we change the order of speakers, as I have Dr. Lou Rockowitz here, and he's joining us from work. He had to step out just to join. So just go out of order a little bit just for that.
Absolutely, yes, that's acceptable. Dr. Rockowitz did submit a letter indicating he had limited time, so we could take him out of order. Dr. Rockowitz, please proceed when you're ready, sir.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I apologize. It seems like we're having a fire drill over here. What else is new?
I was having one in my office too, so we're good. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you for being here. And Mike, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to being offered to step up in this new role as the medical director of the organization. I'm just going to be simple and to the point. I hope folks had a chance to read my letter. I wrote it from the heart. We need to start being kind to one another. We need to start working together. All of us need to start working together for the better good. There is an unlimited need. I can tell you from today, just being in the emergency room today, at the footsteps of Bayside, I'm here in like North Jamaica, South Jamaica. There is an unlimited need. There are unlimited patients. The possibility of another public health emergency, another pandemic is, if you don't think it's possible, then I think maybe you slept through the entire COVID experience. Again, I'm gonna shoot from the cuff here. I was stunned at the way people reacted about me wanting to step up to this role. A lot of things were said to me that were kind of, I'm just gonna leave it as like disheartening. And I'm looking, this is a public health issue. The ambulance corps needs, the ambulance corps is at a, is in the midst of a transition. We're coming out of the darkness of COVID. Things have changed. The entire public health system has changed. Again, if you don't think that there is a tremendous cooperative need for voluntary EMS backup when the voluntary system comes down, then collapses. I don't know what to. I don't know where you were, where anyone has been. Before I accepted this position, I looked very, very deep into the organization. A lot of people had a lot of negative things to say about this organization, but there are things that, this organization has a critical role. It provided pre-hospital care to Fort Taunton. Fort Taunton is another place that's in transition. Somebody said to me that the organization is doing nothing. Well, I think that everyone should know that this organization, this ambulance corps, responded to the recent plane crash. This organization stabilized the patient, a trauma patient, from a plane crash, and just successfully transported that patient to a trauma center, saving that patient's life. The Bay community is in transition. I think it needs this expansion so that they can further recruit, that they can expand the organization. This is our chance to expand the organization, to recruit more members. And again, from a public health standpoint, COVID was good for business, so to speak.
COVID woke a lot of people up. COVID has inspired a lot of people to want to get involved. I can tell you that at my School of Public Health at SUNY Albany, the numbers are up. So as things settle down, I can guarantee you people are going to want to get involved. I don't know what else, I don't what else to say. I think I captured everything in the letter. I'm incredibly excited to be part of the organization. I've been in touch with some folks from the TBTA, the Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, and the New York State Police. And in the late summer, early fall, I'm going to be working to put together a CME that will be available to everybody in the entire REMSCO system about providing pre-hospital care upon bridges. I think it's like a critical thing. Our ambulance corps sits literally beneath a bridge. So I've heard a lot of things about, you guys just go out and help people out of bed, help people that fallen out of bed. If somebody doesn't think that's important, then again, I question why you're doing this. In short, I want us to start being kind to one another. I want us to all to start working together. There are unlimited patients. Nobody should be fighting for territories, for areas, for blocks. It's completely absurd. There are unlimited patients. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Rockwitz. Do members of the council have any questions for Dr. Rockwitz? Just kidding. I see none. Charlie, do you see any?
There are things that have been said to me over these past few weeks as I prepared myself, to take on this role, and people should be ashamed of themselves. I question why you all are doing this. We're doing this for the community. We're doing this because we care. We're doing this because we want to help people. This is not some hillbilly social club nonsense that people kick back and just argue. We're here to help people. It's enough. Let's start being kind to one another, respectful to one another, and let's work together. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Dr. Rockwitz. But before you go, I wanted to ask a follow-up question. The question before, well, first it'll be the ambulance committee, and then second, the entire council is whether public need exists in this area. So based on your knowledge as an emergency department physician, does public need exist as defined in 606 relative to the area formerly covered by Bayside?
There is absolutely no question. If you do not think or comprehend that there is a public need, then you slept through COVID. There is a critical need for overlapping, for backup services. Then I literally watched the 911 system collapse. And to put this aside is insanity. We need to be prepared for this. It's time to learn from the lessons of COVID. It's time to be prepared. It's time for us all to start working together. If you don't think that it can happen again, it can happen again. It's time for us to start training together, working collaboratively, and learn from the lessons of COVID. Our 911, this disease nearly wiped out the entire infrastructure of the 911 system. And what we would have been left with was our volunteer ambulance services. We're the last line. To save one life is to save a million. If an organization saves one person and is available, then every dollar, every bit of training paid. These organizations are critical. They're absolutely critical.
Thank you, Dr. Rockowitz. Do any members of the council have any questions for Dr. Rockowitz before we proceed with Jenna Lanzetta? Seeing none, Dr. Rockowitz, thank you for making time for us this evening.
Thank you.
All right, well, next to go to Jenna Lanzetta, President, Northwest Bayside Civic Association.
Yes, she could not make it this evening. She had a conflict. However, she submitted a statement that there is a public need, and she did it already, and it should be one of the exhibits.
One of the exhibits attached to the application. Okay, very good. We will rely on her written statement.
She put in another statement just for the hearing for public
Okay.
testimony. So you should
Okay.
have two statements from her.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I believe our next speaker, Chris Capo, I did see him on. Mr. Capo, you prepared to speak? All right, thank you. Charlie, can you unmute Mr. Capo? Thank you. You're all set, sir. Go right ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm the president of what's left of Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps. As you know, that our operating certificate has been revoked, and we're putting our support behind Bay community for our territory. We feel that they're a competent team. We're actually giving them space in our building and an ambulance to cover our area. I have no doubt in my mind that they would be the perfect fit in this neighborhood. Since they are Bayside, no matter how you look at it, they're still a Bayside volunteer. I've spoken to my board, I've spoken to members, and we all agree that Baycom would be the perfect fit for our community. I have very little to say outside of that, but again, my members support this certificate of need, just for the fact that we used to run 2 ambulances for Bayside. So putting one more in here is perfect. Putting 2 in here would be even better. But at least we have people that are from our community that have worked together with us in past years. So I feel that the need for Baycom to be part of Bayside, or Bayside to be part of Baycom, is a great need. That's about all I would have to say at the moment. If anybody has questions for me.
Thank you, sir. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Capo? I'm seeing none. Charlie, or any indicated in the chat? All right, hearing none. Mr. Capo, I had one follow-up. Mr. Lyons in his initial presentation referred to a recent application by Glen Oaks for substantially the same area, albeit with an additional block. Are you familiar with the application that was made previously by Glen Oaks?
Yes.
Did your organization support that application?
No.
Okay. Has there been a change in public need from the time that application was made until the present time?
In what sense?
Does need exist now that did not exist previously, or are ambulance calls being responded to less frequently now? What prompts the change?
To believe it or not, we have our phones back online. They all get directed to my cell phone, and I actually have people calling for an ambulance, maybe for transport or not. Which then I will refer them, if it's emergency, back to 911 or to their local volley, because some of them are outside of our area.
Okay.
So
how often do you have an estimate as to how many calls per day or calls per week you receive for service from the former Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps?
I haven't taken any type of record of how many calls I get. I do get periodically, I would say anywhere between 3 and 10 calls a week at times.
Okay.
But I do find that some of these calls are people from Glen Oaks calling in, asking for an ambulance. And I'm like, where do you live? They give me their address. I said, I'm sorry, you're not in my territory. You're in Glen Oaks territory. Please give them a call. And I'll refer them, and I'll give them the number and refer it to them. But I have received calls like that.
Okay, and those would be included within the 3 to 10
Yeah.
per week that you estimate. Okay. All right. Does any member of the council have any questions for Mr. Capo? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, sir. We'll move along to Ashley Kim, President, Little Neck Douglaston Community Ambulance Corps.
Hello, my name is Ashley Kim. I am the current president of the Little Neck Douglaston Community Ambulance Corps. I'm here in support of Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps in providing ambulance services in Bayside. LNDCAC has a long history and relationship with the Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps, Bay Community, and the Bayside community. We have ties with Bayside leading back to the start of our own community ambulance corps starting up. Our first ambulance was actually donated by the Bayside Ambulance Corps when we were starting up in 1958. Little Neck Douglaston Community Ambulance Corps currently did share the entire eastern boundary of Bayside's former area. We had a good mutual aid agreement with the Bayside area and kept a good relationship with them throughout the years. If the application is approved, Little Neck Douglaston Community Ambulance Corps would continue to provide mutual aid to Bayside as we work together with the Bay community. And I wholeheartedly support Bayside Community Ambulance Corps' application to expand, and we are looking forward to continue working with them.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Do any members of the council have any questions for Ms. Kim? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll now go to Ed Gorman, President and Chief of Belrose Rescue. Charlie, I'm not seeing a Mr. Gorman
So
in the meeting.
yeah, he was going to make it. If he hasn't made it, I do have a statement from him for his public testimony tonight, and I can definitely email that over to you.
Okay, as long as you have it now, you can send that by email to Marie. Yep, and we'll incorporate that as his testimony, given that he was registered to speak and he has a statement prepared to be given now. Next up is Christopher Calandrella, Dr. Calandrella, I should say, Associate Chair, Department of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Calandrella here.
Moment. I do have a hands up for a question.
Oh, sure. Yes, go right ahead.
Sorry about that. Sean Graves, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My question is for Ms. Kim. I just was wondering what was the position of her ambulance service during the Go Back application? I know that that's been clarified by Bayside, but was that also clarified regarding her organization?
Ms. Kim, are you still on?
Yes, Little Neck Douglaston had opposed what else?
Okay, and what was the stated reason?
I believe that we had opposed the application due to in support of BAYCOM.
I'm sorry, but just to clarify, at that time, BAYCOM did not submit an application. Is that correct?
Yes, they have not submitted an application at the time, but they were planning on to.
Thank you, Ms. Kim.
Ms. Kim, with respect to the present application, is it your agency's position that public need exists in the area where the territory sought for expansion under the operating certificate?
Yes, we do believe that there is a need for the community.
Okay. Did public need exist at the time of the Glen Oaks application, as Mr. Lyons indicated as well?
Yes, there was.
Okay. but your organization's decision at that point was to support one entity over the other. Is that a fair representation of what you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe Mr. Kessel has raised his hand to ask a question. Mr. Kessel?
Travis Kessel. No, my question was actually what your follow-up was, that if need existed at the time of the initial application.
Yes, as I said, there was a need.
Mr. Hannigan is frozen, so I think he's about to get kicked off just before we go any further.
Oh, God, sometimes I hate Verizon. Sorry, folks. There he goes. Joe, you able to assist him again?
Marie, I'm on.
Okay,
I'm going to keep it on the just the cellular.
okay.
Tim, if you're finding that you're having connectivity issues, I would recommend just turning off your video so that we can focus on your audio.
Okay. Very good. Joe, how's that?
We hear you fine.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
That should help support that you're on cellular. Make sure
Excellent.
you're not getting everything choppy.
Okay, very good. Thanks. I last left off with Mr. Kessel asking a question of Ms. Kim. Has that question been answered?
Travis Kessel, yes. Your follow-up question of if there was a need at the time of the initial application was answered.
Okay. Did you have any subsequent questions, Mr. Kessel, in response to that answer that I received?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to Ed Gorman, President and Chief, Belrose Rescue. Is Mr. Gorman on yet or no?
Mr. Gorman is not on, Tim.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed then. Monsignor Michalski, is the Monsignor on?
I have the statement from Ed Gorman, which I can email to you if you couldn't attend.
Okay.
So
Yep,
I'll email it to Marie.
You can submit that. Oh, yeah, Marie, yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay. I think we were up to Dr. Christopher Calandrella.
Yes, he was next up. I was just seeing if the Monsignor is on right now as well.
I do not see the Monsignors on.
Okay. Is Dr. Calandrella on?
He isn't either. His clinical hours changed, and he's unavailable to make the hearing. But he submitted a statement for this public testimony, and I have it. And I can email it to you, or email it to Marie. I will email it to Marie.
All right, thank you. Yes, please send that to Marie. You have those statements about Mr. Lyons before you now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, if you could send those to Marie before the close of this meeting, if you have them by email or scan, that would be preferred.
Okay.
Do you want them read into the record?
I could do that.
Mr. Lyons, in terms of length, why don't you go ahead and read? You said you had one from Mr. Gorman first.
Okay.
We'll start with the statement of Ed Gorman, President and Chief, Belrose Rescue.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Lyons.
Just pulling it up. Dear Mr. Lyons, I'm writing to express support for the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps application to the Regional Emergency Medical Services Council of New York City and New York State Department of Health for approval to expand its ability to operate a basic EMT volunteer EMS service in the adjacent community of Bayside, New York, in Queens County. The expanded area comprises an area south of 24th Avenue between Cross Island Parkway and Bell Boulevard, south of 26th Avenue between Bell Boulevard and the Clearview Expressway, south of 23rd Avenue between Clearview Expressway and 201st Street, south of 26th Avenue between 201st Street and Utopia Parkway, and south of 26th Avenue between Utopia Parkway and Francis Lewis Boulevard up to Long Island Expressway and Queens Community Board 7 and 11, within the confines of the 111th and the 109th precinct. We have received a definition of public need as follows: the absence of reduced availability or inadequate level of care in ambulance or emergency medical service available to a geographical area that is not readily correctable through reallocation or improvement of existing resources. Variables in considering public need include geography, population, size, density, projections, level of care, existing available, quality, reliability, and response of the existing services, types of service, emergency, non-emergency, special need. For example, air, industrial facilities, service effectiveness, cost and operation, and other local factors. As indicated within New York State Department of Health, Bureau of EMS, Policy Statement 0606, EMS Certificate Application Process Con. I'm happy to acknowledge that this proposed area expansion will provide better utilization of existing community-based EMS resources, as the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps has an excellent service record since 1968. Currently in the New York City 911 systems operating greater than 100% need without the capability to expand or relocate resources into this relatively projected area of the borough. The services provided by Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps are provided to all and are not based on medical need, necessity, or the ability to pay. They are active participants in the EMS system, respond to all types of medical emergencies in their existing community, citywide disasters, medical standby coverages for community events, provide non-emergency ambulance transport when needed, as well as community-based training. All these community-specific services cannot be replicated by other municipal, commercial, and hospital systems without considerable resource allocation expense. They also fill the gap created by the loss of service provided by the Bayside Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which ceased to operate after more than 50 years. Therefore, it is my pleasure to endorse Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps application and request that they receive the approval to expand their operation as indicated. Best regards, Ed Gorman.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Mr. Kessel has raised his hand to ask a question. Mr. Kessel, is that a new question or is it an old one from the previous time you raised your hand?
Travis Kessel. It's a new question.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Based on the Belrose testimony, there's a question for Mike, being that he read it. Are we safe to assume that Belrose, just like Little Neck and Bayside and Baycom, opposed the Glen Oaks application for need and prevented an ambulance from serving a needed area based on preference of another agency, not on the actual need?
I cannot speak for someone else.
Mr. Kessel, in a few moments, we'll have representatives from Glen Oaks that they may be able to comment on that. But we have several representatives from Glen Oaks, at least 4, signed up to speak. So that you may want to reserve, because Mr. Lyons can't answer, you may want to reserve your question for one of the reps from Glen Oaks. Mr. Lyons, do you have a statement from Dr. Calandrella regarding your application?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You can go ahead and read that. Yes. Yes. Carissa, who is our stenographer, we will send you copies of these statements. Marie will forward them so that to the extent that Mr. Lyons reads them quickly, we won't hold you to every word. We'll send you the written one so you can accurately record in the record. Okay, Mr. Lyons, on behalf of Dr. Calandrella, please go ahead and read his statement.
Okay. Dear Mr. Lyons, I'm writing to express support for the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps' application to the Regional EMS Council of New York City and New York State Department of Health for approval to expand its ability to operate a basic EMT volunteer EMS service in their adjacent community of Bayside, New York, and Queens County. The expanded area comprises an area south of 24th Avenue between Cross Island Parkway and Bell Boulevard, south of 26th Avenue between Bell Boulevard and the Clearview Expressway, south of 23rd Avenue between Clearview Expressway and 201st Street, south of 26th Avenue between 201st Street and Utopia Parkway, and south of 26th Avenue between Utopia Parkway and Francis Lewis Boulevard up to Long Island Expressway and Queens Community Board 7 and 11, within the confines of the NYPD 111th and 109th precinct. As a nearby resident and someone who spends a lot of time in this community, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for this neighborhood to have these additional resources available for its residents. Whether I'm dining at Maria's restaurant or buying goods at Bayside Plumbing Supply, I can attest to how wonderful and diverse our expanding community has become. As a physician working and serving this area during the pandemic, I can verify the impact the first line responders had and the care they provided to our friends and families. As a physician, I can also speak to the dedication and commitment the EMS workers exhibited daily in the face of so many challenges. And finally, as a father of 3 daughters that attend school in Bayside, I can affirm the importance of having resources available to care for my family in times of emergency. We have received the definition of public need as follows: the demonstrated absence, reduced availability, or inadequate level of care in ambulance or emergency medical service available to a geographical area, which is not readily correctable through reallocation or improvement of existing resources. Variables in considering public need include geography, population, size, density projections, level of care, existing availability, quality, reliability, and response of existing services, type of service emergency, not emergency, special needs, for example, air and industrial facility, service effectiveness, cost and operation, and other local factors. As indicated within, New York State Department of Health, Bureau of EMS Policy Statement 0606, Certificate Application Process Con. I'm happy to acknowledge that this proposed area expansion will provide better utilization of existing community-based EMS resources, as the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps has an excellent service record since their inception in 1968. Currently, the New York City EMS 911 system is operating at greater than 100% need without the capability to expand or relocate resources into this relatively protracted area of the borough. The services provided by the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps are provided to all and are not based on medical need, necessity, or their ability to pay. They're active participants in the EMS system, respond to all types of medical emergencies within their existing communities, assist in citywide disaster pandemic activations, medical standby coverage for community events, and providing non-emergent ambulance transport when needed, as well as community-based training. All of these community-specific services cannot be replicated by other municipal, commercial, and hospital systems without considerable resource allocation and expense. They will also fill the gap created by the loss of services provided by the Bayside Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which ceased to operate after more than 50 years. Therefore, it is my pleasure to endorse the Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps' application and request that they receive their approval to expand their operation as indicated.
Thank you. Mr. Lyons, I have a question for you just with respect to the letter from Mr. Gorman and then from Dr. Calandrella. Were those persons informed of your pending appeal of Glen Oaks before the time that they submitted letters in support of your application?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, they were the ones who would have to answer, but I believe
Yeah.
they all do know.
Okay.
The appeal is in the process. The status of the appeal is based off the REMSCO website. And yes, we don't know if we're the only ones who file an appeal. We just know that the application is under appeal and we can only speak to, our agency. I don't know if other agencies appealed, you have to ask Ed Gorman.
Yep, that's correct. Okay. Thank you. The next person that registered to speak is Gerald Gelbard on behalf of Glen Oaks Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Charlie, if you can unmute Mr. Gelbard. And Mr. Gelbard, when you're unmuted, you can proceed, sir.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Hearing Officer, REMSCO, Ambulance Committee, council members, and guests. Tonight, I will be speaking in opposition on behalf of the Glen Oaks Volunteer Ambulance Corps. The applicant, Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps, cites a need to restore volunteer EMS services that were left unserved when the original Bayside VAC ceased ambulance operations in 2018. Yet, the applicant in 3+ years has not applied for an area expansion. It was only after the Glen Oaks gained approval that they went forward with this submission. Furthermore, the applicant also filed an appeal in December, which obstructs our operation from serving the very same community that they cite as needing ambulance services. This appeal was a frivolous tactic to delay and obstruct EMS delivery to this community while they placed their own application for need. If restoration of volunteer EMS services were paramount, opposition and appeal of the previous approval would not have occurred. Their interest to service this new population is not genuine and appears predicated on want, desire, agency self-preservation, and an infusion of needed finance by a secondary entity. The area being proposed exhibits a significantly larger population size. This larger scope of coverage dictates that an agency must retain the size and scope to tackle such an increase in potential call volume without impacting the service being provided to their current operating area. The applicant currently retains a team of 10 EMTs. This is hardly enough staff to effectively cover the operating territory. The application is not complete and should not have been proceeded to this hearing level, as they did not supply all the U.S. postal mailing receipts for the affected adjacent areas. Flushing, Jamaica Estates, and Glen Oaks VAC's documents are not present in the submission, nor can they be added at this time. Was this a deliberate step by the applicant to hide their plans from the agencies so they could not provide a rebuttal or work on collaborating for the better good of the community? We don't know. In addition, Dr. Krupe, the applicant's medical director for over 20 years, removed his endorsement of this expansion and resigned prior to the application being deemed complete. Aside from wondering why this occurred, the application is not complete, as the REMSCO application completeness checklist specifically notes the requirement of the medical director's endorsement at the time of submission. Deviation from this standard practice and procedure would show partiality to this applicant. In addition, the announcement of their new medical director this evening bears no merit, as he does not have any experience with this agency and cannot accurately endorse their operational capacity to engage in expanding. I would also note that Form DOH 3777 submitted with this application lists Dr. Krupe. Furthermore, reason to consider this application incomplete and factually incorrect at the time of this hearing. In the literary arena, plagiarism is the utmost in flattery. We are humbled that another agency sought out our submission. However, in this case, submitting incomplete, inaccurate, or copied information for this proceeding is not a true representation of the organization's research, deliverables, and capabilities to substantiate the burden of proof clause. The application that Bay Community submitted is a 74.9% direct copy, inclusive of the typos that were contained in our original application. This side-by-side review was conducted using plagiarism software. This is a representation of someone using a term paper for a friend that received an A and makes it their own with some minor variations to receive that same A. We are not in school, and this submission should not be rendered as their own work. Since the Glen Oaks approval, FDNY EMS redeployed or reallocated existing BLS ambulances toward the core of the Bayside area, which was not present during the Glen Oaks process and subsequent approval. This reallocation of existing resources, as well as the recent regional approval, of the Glen Oaks VAC expansion application for this same area now meets the needs of restoring community volunteer EMS resources that were once provided by the old Bayside Community VAC group. This recent development sustains that there is no new additional need for BLS EMS service in this same area. The applicant also does not address the gap in ALS availability for this very same area, nor can they provide that level of service as they are a BLS service only. The inequity or insufficient availability of EMS that was cited in the previous Glen Oaks process has since been addressed between the FDNY EMS change in ambulance deployment, as well as the recent regional approval of the Glen Oaks VAC application. In fact, Glen Oaks VAC reallocated resources into the Bayside community in March of this year to help establish a community vaccination pod as the contracted commercial provider was unable to fulfill this need. This redeployment or reallocation of resources was coordinated in 30 minutes, and the site was able to begin vaccinating. In addition, Glen Oaks has provided ALS and BLS care and transport for various medical emergencies in this very same area under a regional emergency order since March of this year. The applicant operates as a BLS service and cannot provide the same level of services and is not able to substantiate that their additional resources are needed. The area, by means of the Glen Oaks VAC, also increases area coverage for critical ALS assignment types, which the applicant does not provide. The applicant states that they handle an average of 150 calls per year in their application. Public data obtained indicates the following. Actual call volume in 2019 was 45 submissions with 22 emergency responses. In 2020, the agency had 70 calls, 47 of those being emergency responses. The 2020 data also includes approximately 12 responses, only 12, during the 911 COVID mutual aid activation from March 27 to May 31st, 2020. A review of the agency's not-for-profit IRS 990s would also concur with this data, as their program line item income and revenue recovery is listed at less than $5,000 a year for the preceding 3 years of record availability. The applicant also addresses that adjacent volunteer EMS providers only operate at the BLS level. This is another incorrect statement and a direct copy of the Glen Oaks narrative. While this was a true statement from the Glen Oaks perspective, the applicant used this incorrectly, as we provide a tiered ALS and BLS level of care. In addition, they addressed their relationship with Dr. Krupe and the QA/QI that is performed. What they also left in from the Glen Oaks narrative is the specific portion that speaks to EMS call review sessions available to the applicant and the region. This statement is again inaccurate, as Dr. Krupe regularly provides regional EMS call review sessions through Glen Oaks to meet the New York City REMAC call review needs for the region. He has not, nor have there been any public offerings of CME at the Bayside community location. Again, this is not an accurate statement. The 911 EMS response times provided in the narrative are identical to what was submitted and current at the time of the Glen Oaks submission in 2020. Unfortunately, the statistics for 2020 were not provided and presumed not researched for the Bay community submission and should be considered an incomplete assessment of the need. In addition, the agency neglected to include the appropriate 911 EMS response times for the 109th Police Precinct that they are also proposing to expand into under this application. Therefore, in addition to being inaccurate, this area in their impact statement is incomplete and does not address need. The agency also did not deviate from the Glen Oaks submission in this section, as they use the exact language that now does not apply to this particular application. The applicant states that they will be able to use the Bayside VAC to handle and house their ambulance for better response. While that may or may not be true, there are no documents to support this in their submission. And quite frankly, our agency, in a personal meeting with Mr. Capo, was made that same offer by the president of Bayside VAC, who stated that he is not partial to any agency, and if our agency is approved, we can place a vehicle there. So the only thing this body can take into consideration is the now and the present, which is the applicant's current headquarters, location, fiscal, personnel, and operating environment. From an agency staffing perspective, they identify a staff of 25 to 30. However, the public documents obtained from their recent New York State DOH recertification indicate a cadre of about 10 EMTs and about 5 non-EMTs, including some that obviously do not ride an ambulance. This is most definitely an inaccurate account of the agency's operational capabilities and must be considered when determining the capability to service a new population, let alone what it would do to their current one, as well as the EMS system if approved. How many more calls will be placed back into the region's EMS system? The application uses a quote about soliciting funds to maintain a reliable fleet. Looking at their fleet information, the agency appears to not have realized enough capital to replace their 1993 and 1999 single rear wheel modular ambulances. Again, this is an inaccuracy of the facts, budgets, and shows that the agency is attempting to use their statements to garner approvals when in fact they are attempting to expand beyond the agency's fiscal means, which would be devastating to their current and any other communities. As an active EMS provider and leader for over 40 years, who first started in and remains active in the volunteer EMS community, I've had a front row seat to the accomplishments and unfortunately the shortfalls of volunteer EMS agencies in this and other regions. As many in the audience are aware, I am always advocating regionally and statewide on behalf of volunteer EMS. I must caution everyone that a good portion of the information provided by the applicant to engage support for this proceeding may have been inaccurate or misleading and should not be taken into account to render an approval for the determination of public need. Bay Community VAC has not demonstrated the need for additional resources in this proposed area, nor have they provided a complete, accurate, and truthful submission. Approval of this application would be detrimental to the residents of the Bayside, of the Bayside community, the volunteer EMS community, as well as the regional EMS system. And I thank you for your indulgence and your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gelbard. Mr. Kessler, I believe you had a question before relative to Glen Oaks. Would you like to ask Mr. Gelbard that question at this time? Is Mr. Kessel still on?
Is still in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie.
Is he unmuted? Yeah, unmute Travis, he's muted. Actually, I'll unmute him. I can't unmute him. Charlie, you're gonna have to unmute Travis.
Hi there. Yeah, no, it wasn't in relative to Glen Oaks. It was in relative to the agencies specifically who had opposed one need application and have been in support of the other. So it wasn't really in reference to Glen Oaks. It was in reference to the other agencies.
Okay. Mr. Gelbard, are you aware of what agencies, if any, opposed your application?
Yes, Bay Community Volunteer Ambulance Corps was the only agency that submitted an appeal against our REMSCO regional approval.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Gelbard? Charlie, if you see any, go ahead and please unmute them. I'm scrolling through now.
I do not see any indications of a question.
Okay, neither do I, thanks. Mr. Gelbard, I just want to ask a few follow-up questions based on your statement. I will note that we did receive your statement as well, and has been marked as an exhibit in this proceeding because it was received in written form in advance of this evening's hearing. I wanted to ask, with respect to the your claim that the applicant plagiarized the the Glen Oaks application, can you identify the software or program that you used to determine the 74.9% direct copy?
I believe my colleague, Dave Mekatansky, could answer that question when he gets to it.
Okay. At what point did your entity determine that your application was plagiarized in this case, or believe that your application has been plagiarized?
Probably immediately after it was published.
Okay. And you indicated with respect to the narrative provided by this applicant, they indicated that there are only BLS level agencies neighboring. You clearly do provide ALS care though, correct?
Absolutely. We have 3 ambulances, 2 of which are ALS capable. And in fact, during these operations with vaccine sites, we've actually had all 3 operating, 1 to cover the response area and actually 2 to cover some of the vaccine sites because some of the other regional adjacent volunteer ambulance corps could not cover it, and we jumped in and provided the extra coverage.
Okay. Is it a fair statement, sir, with respect to all other agencies except for yours? Are they all BLS only level agencies?
All affected agencies, actually all agencies in East Queens operate at the BLS level, except us.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's all I have for you, sir. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Gelbard? Mr. Mekatansky, I see you had your hand raised. You're actually scheduled next to speak, so I'll let you address your comment there. I'm just scanning to see if we have any council members would like to ask questions of this speaker. I'm seeing none. Charlie, is that consistent with what you see?
Yes, it is.
All right, very well. We will proceed then with statements by Dave Mekatansky on behalf of Glen Oaks. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, I just wanted to, that question, I know Jerry and I work closely together, running a lot of stuff here. We use CopyLeaks. I know it's used by a lot of colleges in terms of looking at term papers. So CopyLeaks was where we compared it. And the thing that set me off that put it through is discussing about a youth squad. I don't believe Bay Community has ever had a youth squad, despite it being detailed in their application. That's kind of what triggered the question of plagiarism. I mean, again, we're not a college, we're not an academic university, so I don't want to say any kind of legal terms there.
No, I appreciate the response to that question. Thank you, sir. You obviously now have the floor. You can proceed with any comments you wish to make.
Sure. I'll be brief. I know it takes a long time to do this, but thank you, Mr. Hannigan. Thank you, members of the Ambulance Committee, members of REMSCO. As someone who's recently completed this application and hearing process, I'm appreciative of everyone's time. And I want to be here to kind of help clarify this a little bit better. As we discussed already, GoVAC, Glen Oaks VAC, received the approval for the determination of need back in November 2020. But unfortunately, despite being someone who always supports volunteer EMS, especially throughout New York City, especially throughout New York State, I'm opposing this application. But first, in all honesty, Bayside absolutely has a need. Bayside needs an exceptional volunteer ambulance agency that cares about responding to the community. Bayside needs an agency with 105 EMTs to staff multiple crews day in, day out, especially for an agency that's looking to serve multiple areas. Bayside needs an agency that can offer advanced life support. We have an aging population with critical needs. I'm an EMT, BLS before ALS, but our crews have enough REMAC certified paramedics that we're staffing ambulances 7 days per week. Bayside needs an agency with over a dozen state certified instructors with collectively not to age anyone, hundreds of years of EMS experience, capable of providing mentorship and education to new EMTs and students, especially coming from the Bayside area. Bayside needs an agency with an active youth corps program. Teenagers and future healthcare professionals from throughout the Bayside area need a place where they can learn and develop their interest in the medical field. Bayside needs an agency that within your minutes, as Jerry had just discussed, can provide medical standby coverage at vaccination sites right in the Bayside area. So far, I'm very appreciative of my crews. We've covered over 250 hours of vaccination sites over the past few months when it was open to all volunteers. All the meanwhile covering our own response area. That's again, those 105 EMTs can do that. I can go on and on. The answer is simple. Bayside has a need. Unfortunately, Bay Community VAC is unable to provide for those real needs of the Bayside community. Going back, November 17th, 2020, this council, and I appreciate it so much, voted in approval for Glen Oaks VAC to serve the community. But this decision was appealed on somewhat questionable grounds, which is causing further time, further expense, and frankly, further loss to the Bayside community, who doesn't have this ambulance able to respond in their community today, January 1st. Bayside does not need an agency that would obstruct and delay ambulance services in the community for their own want and desire for choice. This isn't Amazon, this isn't Uber. This is the need for an ambulance service. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Mekatansky? Charlie, do you see any questions?
Questions?
All right. Mr. Mekatansky, with respect to, you said that you acknowledge that public need does exist. Is that your statement this evening?
I think there's a public need for a lot of the services that Glen Oaks can provide.
Okay. Is it your position, sir, that public need exists sufficient to support two agencies having operating authority in this, two volunteer agencies having operating authority in this area?
I think given the size of our agency, we're fully able to cover that response. And I know a lot of EMS operational people are in this meeting can all attest that it's hard to run, multiple agencies responding to one call. Having it as one agency that can, having one agency that can negotiate calls, cover BLS and ALS in-house. That's a big benefit to the community. And that's, I think, one big enough agency could easily cover this area. That's what I think Glen Oaks is. Again, even going back, we met with Mike Lyons and Brian, just right here in our building. And we discussed having a mutual aid agreement, being able to work together. They said they would come back to us. I guess thank you to, I believe Ashley was, who I guess told us that they had always been planning this. But yeah, we were trying to work on this together and build one cohesive agency. Lou Rockwitz said great things. We got to be kinder. We got to work together. Stopping us, obstructing us is not working together.
Thank you, sir. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Mekatansky before we proceed? All right, I see none. Charlie, can you confirm that on your end?
Yes, it is the same on my end.
All right, thank you. Next up is Louis Greco from Glen Oaks. Mr. Greco.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Louis Greco, and I'm the president and chief of Park Slope Volunteer Ambulance in Brooklyn and vice chair of District 4. Back in November, the council approved Glen Oaks' application, and they found that there was a need. And the need was there, and it was demonstrated clearly by Glen Oaks' application. Subsequently, Bay Community put in filed an appeal. And when doing so, we move forward to their application. In their application, they are outlining the proposal of potentially there being 2 volunteer agencies covering the same area. And that's never been the case in the city. And one of the biggest reasons that that's not the case is by doing so, we put volunteer agencies against one another. We start competing for the same elected officials and their support, or financial, as well as just day-to-day support that we gain from them. We start competing against each other for the same membership base, and we start competing against each other for the same call volume, which, let's be frank, for volunteer ambulances throughout the city, the majority of them, that billable call volume is imperative to them continuing to operate. By inserting 2 agencies over the same coverage area, we've set up ourselves for failure as a volunteer sector throughout the city. The volunteer sector is different than other sectors, and it's important that communities have the ability to identify what their community's volunteer ambulance corps is. Furthermore, the ability for the agency to be able to move forward and to have the leadership and the depth to service a community is more important at this point than geographic boundaries. The ability for an agency to have the manpower to be in service, and the statistics of the 2 agencies that have proposed, and I understand that tonight is about Bay Community's application, but we need to look back at that November approval, right? That November approval clearly indicates an agency that demonstrated the ability, and just like Jerry and Dave just presented on behalf of Glen Oaks, it depicted an agency that's moving forward. And the Bay Community Agency has done great work for Bay Community over the years, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But what I want to be clear about is we need an agency that is progressive, that can rise to the needs of this community. A community like has been depicted by Bay Community that's changing. It's becoming more dense in population and more diverse. We need an agency that can service that community. And I think that's one of the most important things when REMSCO reviews this application, is that there is a need, which we determined back in November, but also who can fill that need, who can legitimately fill that need, and who's not just making a grab for territory because they want it. Who can fill that need to serve the people of that community? I appreciate the time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. Do members of the council have any questions for Mr. Greco? I'm seeing none. Charlie, can you confirm that on your end?
Yes, I can confirm.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Greco. The final speaker who is scheduled to speak this evening is Michael Berlin, Esquire, counsel for Glen Oaks. Mr. Berlin, are you on?
I am. How are you? Good afternoon.
I'm doing
Good
well,
evening,
sir. Good afternoon. I think we started in the afternoon.
Evening. It started in the afternoon. We're now in the late evening, it seems. So
you can proceed, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, I am outside counsel of the Glen Oaks. I want to echo the powerful testimony that was opposing the application that was here. And I want to say, putting aside the blatant copying of an application, which in itself would be enough to reject this application and should be seen and looked at very carefully. Again, as Dave said, he mentioned the youth corps, but also the fact that typos were actually copied from the previous application is just illustrative of what this application was and the way that it was rushed in. And I think it's part of a larger process that we're seeing here, which is that the application and also the statements of its supporters are pure gamesmanship. They opposed Glen Oaks' application on pretextual issues. They appealed the valid decision to slow the process. Mr. Lyons himself admitted that there were no grounds for his appeal, in that that its only basis is that there is some overlap. But he says he favors overlap as long as it doesn't affect him. They put in their own copied inaccurate application quickly during the appeal. Their supporters have said previously that there was no public need, as you've asked a number of times, and there's nothing that they can say that would change it except for that they're preferring one group over another. This body should not reward this type of conduct. A party should not be allowed to take a contrary position, appeal on frivolous grounds, use the delay in that appeal because of the backlog that's going on right now in the Department of Health to being heard to capitalize for themselves. The hypocrisy here is absolutely blatant, and I urge this body to see it for what it is and to reject it. If they truly want to meet the clear public need, they should withdraw both their application and their groundless appeal and allow things to go forward in the community to be served. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berlin. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Berlin? I'm seeing none. Charlie, can you confirm that on your end?
Confirm.
All right, thank you. Mr. Berlin, I wanted to follow up on the statement you just made there regarding withdrawal of an appeal of the Glen Oaks application. Has anyone, since the time that appeal was made in December of 2020, has anyone from the applicant contacted your entity regarding withdrawal of their appeal subject to clarification of your client's operating territory?
You know, I'd have to refer to Mr. Gelbard. I am not aware of them having done so,
Okay.
but I would like to let him answer because it may be possible that I haven't been informed of that.
Okay. Mr. Gelbard, are you still on?
Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. Your counsel indicated that essentially requested that the applicant advancing the notion that public need exists in this affected area, withdraw its application and then work on some clarification of territory or something outside of the context of challenging public need on appeal. Has the applicant contacted you at any time following the filing of their appeal?
The applicant has not. We attempted prior to our application being submitted to work out a collaborative operational agreement that would have been beneficial to not only the Bayside area, but to the inherent current Bay community area. And as repeated earlier, it was rejected and the application was opposed and subsequently appealed. There were at least 2 individuals outside of my organization that asked Bay community to withdraw their appeal and withdraw their application to be able to work collaboratively to the betterment of the community. And that was also rejected. So that is where we stand right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berlin, with respect to the comments regarding I guess you echo Mr. Gelbard's comments regarding plagiarism of the application. Mr. Berlin, have you personally compared the application that was submitted by the present applicant to the application that was submitted by your client and either independently or concurrently confirmed that it appears that plagiarism occurred?
So I didn't look at it in the detail that was there. I was pointed out certain paragraphs that matched the previous application, including the typos and the other pieces that are there. So I cannot say that I went through it with a line by line as the computer program did, but I was able to look at specific paragraphs that were clearly lifted from the prior application, including ones that included typos that were in the, unfortunately, I wish we'd picked them up in the prior application, but did not, but then were repeated in the subsequent one. It is, I understand there's a seriousness of the charge to say that they simply lifted paragraphs from the application of Glen Oaks and then put it in there, but it is hard to see how, where there are factual inaccuracies that only match Glen Oaks and where there are typos that were copied into the subsequent application, that it was not simply the taking of paragraphs. And as Mr. Gelbard testified to, a substantial amount, almost 75% of it. Now, I have not done that comparison to make the 75%, but I have seen those paragraphs that are identical in including inaccuracies.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, does any member of the council have any further questions for Mr. Berlin? I'm seeing none. Charlie, is that the same on your end?
On my end.
Well, thank you for your time, then. I do appreciate being allowed to speak.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to offer comments on this matter who has not already had the opportunity to speak? If so, please alert Charlie. I'm seeing none. Charlie, has anyone asked to speak yet?
No one's asked to speak.
All right, very good. There being no one else.
I see a hand up. I see two
Oh.
hands up. Yadidra Langsam and Barbara Fisher.
Sure, Dr. Langsam, we could start with Dr. Langsam.
As an academic, I take very seriously accusations of plagiarism. They go bearing on the honesty and of everything that else is being said by the person who's being accused. I just wonder whether whether there's any response to that accusation. I've heard the accusation, and that software, by the way, is one that I use quite frequently. I wonder if there's a response.
Yes, Dr. Langsam, that was a similar question that I had. The applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal in a few moments, depending on whether Ms. Fisher has any comments. But I agree that's a topic that I hope is addressed in rebuttal time. Ms. Fisher, yeah, you're very welcome, sir. Ms. Fisher, do you intend to offer comments at this time regarding the application?
She needs to be unmuted. Hold on, we have to unmute you.
Yeah, Charlie had to unmute her.
Hello?
Charlie, yep, thank you. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I don't have any comment. I just noticed the gentleman's hand was raised for a question and you were saying there was no other questions. That's all. That's my comment.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so someday we'll get to do this in person again, and these oddities of doing this remotely will be solved. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, there being no one further who wishes to comment on this application, the public forum is now closed. Mr. Lyons, this will commence the period of time in which you can exercise your opportunity for rebuttal. The purpose of rebuttal, sir, is to respond to comments made in opposition to the application. Do you intend to exercise your opportunity for rebuttal at this time?
Yes.
All right, please proceed, sir. And I ask that that you do address the comment raised by Dr. Langsam regarding the allegation of plagiarism in your comments. Thank you.
Right. So Glen Volunteer Ambulance Corps only filed after Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps, who we had been working with, started to get their house in order. When they saw that the Bayside Volunteer Ambulance Corps wasn't going to be taken over by the Attorney General for mismanagement, this is the only time they went ahead, went forward and rushed in an application. We had been working with them to restore them all along. We have spent countless hours looking at many different scenarios. And this has been a evolving process since they lost their operating certificate. We've looked at many different scenarios where would include not working with Bayside at all originally if the agency was going to completely go away. So, you know, we've had to modify our application as the whole entire plan evolved. So originally, you know, it was going to be filed in 2020, and then it all along the way, as Bay Community was working to get public support, we were being constantly attacked and undermined by Glen Oaks because they are completely against this. That this is included, you know, as they said, with politicians, with the fact that the medical director that we used to have, was our medical director for 20 years, is also the medical director for Glen Oaks. And he was our medical director first. And he signs our letter for filing in February that he intends to support this expansion and go forward with it. Then all of a sudden, he turns around and picks up and becomes the medical director of Ridgewood Volunteer Ambulance Corps, Middle Village, and Glendale. And then tells us, oh, he's too busy and he can no longer, you know, be our medical director. Only for the expansion. He'll remain our medical director as long as we don't expand. And obviously, you know, there was a conflict of interest, if you want to call it competing for the expansion. And, at REMSCO, I think they tried to explain it 3 different ways, what our medical director, did, and did very, last minute. We had placed in our application at the time it was in, and by the deadline when it should have been deemed complete, he was our medical director. Then we didn't get it deemed complete. It went over the timeline, and then all of a sudden now this is the reason, because he's going to withdraw his support, and he's going to be an interim medical director till we find a replacement. So, what do? We go ahead and we do get a new medical director, so that he can no longer be overburdened and can go in whatever other direction, and we don't have a conflict of interest anymore between 2 agencies that are now competing for the same area. So, that whole aspect of the medical director really is all about the fact that he is also a medical director for Glen Oaks, and the fact that there is a reason which he would not, disclose, that he's getting pressure from that agency. That if he doesn't pressure us to withdraw, it's going to be bad for him. So. He's been our medical director for 20 years. So we said, hey, we'll work and we'll get someone else if this is going to be a problem. So, that's what led to that change. As far as the postal mailing, we did mail endorsements to all the volunteer ambulance corps. It was done in waves, so I don't know if a certain particular wave of postal receipts didn't make it into the application. So that is definitely a something that slipped in that file. Now, as far as the application itself, there are only so many ways to state things. A lot of the data, is the same. It was in the same area. Our application was done in 2020. Then it got pushed out as we continuously kept getting pushed back, and we wound up having to then carry it over into the following year. We had no intent of being this far along and still in the process. And just so everyone knows, when we did file it, it was not instantly deemed complete. It was sent back, and it is very, at the next REMSCO meeting, they literally changed the requirements for filing so that they could deem it incomplete and push us back another month. And this is very concerning because there are a lot of members of REMSCO who have a conflict of interest because they're on Glen Oaks, and some of the ambulance committee as well, and they're really, it's a conflict. And they're really pushing this for that. Now, everyone, Glen Oaks states, that they're doing all these vaccination pods. And when they did it on the first day, they had no operating authority to be there whatsoever. And when that occurs, they're not following, and they know they're not following. They have a right to be there in Bayside providing a vaccination pod. So then REMSCO had to run and try to come up with a way to cover this. And they first issued one application advisory, which said that the REMSCO has the right to expand operating areas for 60 days. What they failed to read and continue on was the fact that with the approval of the State Department of Health, who actually grants operating certificates. So right after that was issued, it had to be completely rescinded. And then they had to work on finding another way through some sort of mutual aid that they can go ahead and do this. And then the other thing to know about is, the vaccination pods and the calls, and all they're looking to do is all driven by they're looking for payable work. And that's why, they're doing so much of that. Now, as far as plagiarism again, to say that you recognize the document is plagiarized without fully knowing our agency and the details is ridiculous, right? Dave here says, oh, well, we know it's plagiarized because it mentions that Bay Community has the youth squad. Well, guess what? I was a youth squad member, right? I have a youth squad today. You know, you pick on the fact that we have, 25 members. Well, they're not all writing members. We have associate members, and we don't count the youth squad members. So we have them routinely helping out with administrative stuff, and which frees up the other to be working and doing, patient care. And that's how Bay Community has always worked. And yes, we're a smaller agency than Glen Oaks, but we have a different approach to how we get the work done. New York State Department of Health, deems competent and fitness. And the way we get things done with smaller, budget, is that we seek out resources that then can perform the services for us and bring them in on board as associate members who can then do, work for us. So we do a tremendous amount of that to keep things going. So we know how to operate when call volume has gone down. We lost already a huge military residential community, yet we were able to still continue and go forward. And we've always been adapting to do that. So, as far as the call volume, I will have to look into that. Those details, I don't believe that's accurate. I'm not so sure everything is being picked up in the system correctly. As far as some of the other things with our finances, the way we have it written in the application is over many years, not 2 to 3 years. So it is written that way. Now, multiple people did write this document, but some of that stuff is in template. And because we get rejected and we have to follow format that, won't get rejected, we try to mirror, I think, as close as possible to something that wouldn't get approved, wouldn't get, kicked back. It is a template. There's a template in 0606. There isn't one. There's a small one in New York City REMSCO's policy, but that's why there's so much that's similar in our application. Now, as far as being a smaller agency, we're there when we're needed, right? Like Dr. Rockowitz mentioned, hey, there was a plane crash during a COVID pandemic by the Throgs Neck Bridge. We were that one extra ambulance around that could take that co-pilot to a level 1 trauma center, right? We've had the other times when there's been surges, such as, let's say, one summer, a guy went around all of Queens shooting at someone who was wearing red, right? We took a gunshot victim to the hospital, that night. So there is definitely need for always additional providers. In this EMS system, it truly is a system. It is made up of many providers, municipal, hospital, and private and volunteer. There are private ambulance corps that have 200 ambulances. There's private ambulance corps that have 10 or 15. So, it's all comes together as part of the system. The other thing about Bay Community, you want to say about our small size, but we participate with mutual aid with our other ambulance corps like Little Neck Douglaston. So if there's going to be, overflow calls, Little Neck Douglaston is ready there to help us out with that when and if needed. So, that's why we put together, and we are working with the other agencies as well, so that, we can handle what needs to be handled. And, I have to say, when we filed the appeal, we filed it, like I said, for the overlap of borders. However, as we went to work this through, and in my dealings with New York State Department of Health, there was, according to them, a lot of the process not followed. And this has led to many changes in this process, which includes the fact that we asked for some documents from REMSCO. They were never provided, and they've never been publicly posted. And it's led to replacement of the hearing officer for the next few, hearings after that. They did not use the same one as before. So it clearly shows that it is not frivolous. Unfortunately, we thought it was a little minor thing, but when the state took a look at it, it seems like there's a long list of things that need to be, gone through, such about things being amended at the wrong time, things being done with changing of borders that shouldn't have been done during the hearing. All this stuff should have occurred before, and it didn't. And I think it's because, that our appeal has such a strong, real reason for it, that we're getting so much resistance from Glen Oaks. And really, when you follow a process where we're following boundaries and you talk about, let's go do a mutual aid agreement for an area you don't have yet before we file in 2 weeks, there's no realistic way to get that done, to get it approved and put in for an area you don't even have yet. So, I mean, that is just, ridiculous. So the thing is, Henry and I work together. Henry and, Jerry and I have worked together. We've worked together for 20 plus years. We can sit in the same room. We can talk to each other. We're reasonable. But what happens in 2 years from now when neither of us are in the agency and everything's what's filed in the black and white on paper? And that's what really it's about, that the fact that the borders were really at this time really being done and defined by the Department of Health, and we need that accurate. And unfortunately, the application said one thing, then it's a public hearing, it becomes another thing. Then after that, a REMSCO vote becomes, and we've got even different things. And we have no idea which one is actually going to be issued by the Department of Health. So, that was the whole reason for that. Now, the other thing is, when there is mutual aid activations, I'm up in northern Queens at the tip on a peninsula. The only place the fire department will send me is south, which all the time, if the fire department needs help, we're going to get sent to Bayside. And fortunately, it's not going to be Glen Oaks, right? Glen Oaks shares like 5 blocks of common border with Bayside's old area. My whole entire southern border is with them, right? So for me sitting up in North Bayside to go down and cover additional blocks in Bayside is extremely reasonable. And especially on a day where my crew may not have any call to do, now they can definitely handle one in Bayside. So there definitely absolutely is a public need. We do want, this worked out, but, we'll have to, let the administrative law judge and the whole process play out and properly resolve it following process. And that due process is, something that we're fortunate enough to have. And, we looked forward. We did not want things to go messy like this. We tried in the beginning to, hey, can we sat you down, explained the geopolitical boundaries, the ways you can do it where there's no reason for us to appeal at all. And then that wasn't done. And clearly sending us an endorsement letter or solicitation letter with no northern boundaries listed whatsoever or a map is definitely, you're being evasive and completely vague and not being truthful to us. So, that's what has happened here. We do feel for everyone involved that we wish that this had not had gone this way and it had worked out a lot cleaner. But unfortunately, this is where we're at today.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. If I can ask you a follow-up question to your response to rebuttal time here. And I'm asking this solely because it weighs on whether public need exists. Glen Oaks has indicated and reaffirmed today public need exists in the area sought by the application. You, as the applicant, have obviously asserted public need exists. If Glen Oaks were to amend or agree to stipulate that their operating authority from their application from which you've appealed mirrors the exact same operating authority that is the subject of this application, would you withdraw your appeal and allow them to operate in this same area and for your agencies to operate both in this area?
We don't have the exact same boundaries. So we, realizing that part of Bayside's area was Community Board 7, we did a we properly approached Community Board 7, we solicited them, and we got an approval to operate, that they would see a need to have an additional ambulance operate in that part of Community Board 7. I would say, Glen Oaks' big thing is that they only wanted to be in Community Board 11, and that's kind of how they filed their application. They, they claim that they had to by the policy. Community Board 11 has, let's say 4 boundaries. They only used the northern border. They didn't use the eastern border, the western border, the southern border, anything. They only used that and said that's what we had to use upon my area. So if the areas were the same, identical, overlap, and at this time, I don't think an amendment can be done of what's been done from my understanding. But in the same area, if the overlap on my existing area was removed, we could operate together. And now I do want to say that I today operate with another volunteer ambulance corps. I operate in an area that I routinely have HATSOLA in, right? So in my existing area, I do have HATSOLA here, but they're at like a citywide, operating certificate, not a small little local one like the existing volunteer ambulance corps. So there's definitely a way the volunteer ambulance corps can work together. Volunteer ambulance corps are 10-digit dialed. So unless a patient calls the 2 providers, that's the only way you're going to get 2 ambulances going there. So we have it all the time. They'll call 911, they'll call us, and we'll both go. And, at the patient's preference, we'll take them to the hospital. A lot of times 911 won't take them to the hospital if they really want to go to. And then, that's why we're there to do that additional, hey, let's take this person out to Northwell because they want to go to Flushing or something because that's where the ambulance is based. So.
All right. Is there anything further you wish to, you did, sir? Yes. Is there anything further you'd like to add in rebuttal time, or are your comments complete at this time?
I think that's enough for rebuttal.
Okay. Very good, sir. Thank you. I note that Mr. Mekatansky has his hand raised. Mr. Mekatansky, at this point, the rebuttal time is for the sole purpose of comment by the applicant. If you have some questions to procedure or process, you can address that to me, but there can be no further questions to the applicant or from you to the applicant or any additional information offered on behalf of your agency.
No, it wasn't really a question. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. I now, there were several points raised by Mr. Lyons in his statement relative to his rebuttal statement relative to the regional council. Marie Diglio, are you still on the video?
Yes, I am.
I see you here. Marie, would you like to address any of the comments made relative to the regional council by Mr. Lyons in his rebuttal statement?
Yes, I would.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll do them one at a time and try and do them quickly. The purpose of the regional council is to assist ambulance services, not to thwart them. And I'm sorry that you think things that we've done were done specifically to negatively affect your agency. But I'm going to go through and let you know what really has happened. Our change in hearing officer was planned years ago. Our committees have asked for a change in hearing officer. We use the same really good hearing officer for a number of years, but because applications have become more complicated and because of what goes up at the state level, we decided that we needed a hearing officer like Mr. Hannigan, who is well-versed in Article 30 and different types of dealing with these applications. And unfortunately, once we got into the real world of having, attorneys that are specific to Article 30, before we had a hearing officer that he was a part-time attorney and he only wanted an honorarium. Now we have to pay lawyers like every other region in the state. If you look at all the applications from Albany down to Nassau, the applications, our application is 10,000 now. There are applications that require 15,000, and it's all to pay for the hearing costs, which is not just the hearing officer, it's also stenography costs have gone up. All the costs have gone up. And before your application came in, we had known we were going to raise the price on the application. And I'm sorry that we had to do it that night. We actually had a discussion about it. Should we hold it? Should we not? But you would have had to pay before or after. So we just decided to implement our change before your application came in. That was before it was complete. So that's that. With the extension of operating territory, we did not do that to the benefit of specific ambulance services. We did that to address COVID in New York City. We've been working with the New York City Department of Health to staff 35 of their centers and provide ambulance coverage. We got to a point where our privates and hospitals just could not do it anymore. And we could not use the volunteers with having them limited to one space. It started with one location in Queens. So we asked the Department of Health for Glen Oaks, because we work with them. They're very active, they're ALS, and they're available quite often. So I put in a request to the Department of Health. We want to expand their territory for COVID. And after speaking to the Department of Health, they told us that the Article 30 expansion is only good for 60 days. So if we want to do this the right way, we really need to get a regional mutual aid. So we went to work with the OEM, and they gave us a regional mutual aid that covered all the volunteers, because at this point, the COVID response was really escalating. And that's what we had to do. And it's worked out really well. We're trying to get as many volunteers into the system as possible. And, units that have availability. Okay, so that's two things.
I don't think I'm going
I'm sorry? The last thing is, with regards to your medical director, Dr. Krupe, I held up the application for a few days because I wasn't sure what to do with no medical director. So I did speak to Dana Jonas in the Department of Health, and I said, should we hold up this application? And he said no. And that's when I presented it to the ambulance committee and we went forward. Because otherwise this application could have been held until you had formally adopted a new medical director. And I didn't want to hold you up since you'd already waited so long. Okay, and I think that pretty much answers your questions. I mean, we really don't want to be your enemy. We want to treat everybody the same, but we have processes that we have to adhere to. And if we didn't do things the way we do them, you may be able to get past the public hearing here, but there are a lot of pitfalls between here and the State EMS Council where the final approval comes from. So we're trying to make it work for you here. I don't see this as being an easy voyage for you at this point. And, all we can do is make sure the process here at least gets you to the next step. Okay, and that's the end of my statement.
Thank you, Marie. I will note that Exhibit 4 to this hearing is the timeline of events prepared by Council Executive Director Marie Diglio. That indicates that the original application from the applicant was received on March 21st, 2021, and was deemed complete on April 23rd, 2021. So just about a month later, and that any delay with respect to the notification by the medical director, Dr. Krupe, on 4/13/2021 was again remedied and deemed complete 10 days later by 4/23/2021 when the application was deemed complete. And those dates and the account of events are contained within Exhibit 4 to this proceeding. The time is now 8:28 p.m. The record is now closed. There will be a transcript made of this proceeding, and I will prepare my report and submit it to the ambulance committee. The committee will meet and then make a recommendation to the REMSCO as to whether the application for expansion should be approved. There being no further business before the council, I adjourn the hearing. For the applicant's knowledge, the date of the next council and the ambulance committee meeting is June 29th, 2021. It's available for attendance by Zoom webinar. Information for your purposes for attending those meetings is available at the council's website, NYCREMSCO.org. There being no further business, I conclude the hearing. I thank you all for accommodating me with my technical difficulties this evening, and appreciate the decorum that council members and the various speakers showed in making their presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hannigan.
Thank you, Mr. Hannigan.
Charlie,
Thank
you may
you.
stop the live stream now.
Thank you.